Absolutely not. Policy restrictions prevent any performance bonuses this quarter, my boss Marcus Thompson declared, leaning back in his leather chair with that smug smile I had grown to despise. I sat across from his mahogany desk in our Austin office, my hands folded calmly in my lap despite the rage burning inside me. Just 3 days earlier, I had single-handedly prevented what could have been the most catastrophic data breach in TechFlow Industries' history, saving the company an estimated $2 million annually. But apparently, that wasn't enough to earn me the $50,000 bonus Marcus had promised when he assigned me this impossible task. I understand completely, I replied with a serene smile, watching his eyebrows raise slightly at my unexpected composure. What Marcus didn't know was that I had anticipated this exact scenario. The man sitting across from me had built his entire career on taking credit for other people's innovations, and I had learned not to trust his promises. My name is Vicky Collins, and I'm a 32-year-old senior software engineer at TechFlow Industries, one of Austin's fastest-growing tech companies. For the past 4 years, I had watched Marcus climb the corporate ladder by claiming ownership of solutions his team developed. This time, however, I had prepared for his inevitable betrayal. 3 weeks ago, our client database had suffered a massive security vulnerability that threatened to expose sensitive information from over 500,000 customers. The breach would have resulted in lawsuits, regulatory fines, and a reputation disaster that could have bankrupted our mid-sized company. While Marcus panicked and the executive team scrambled for solutions, I worked 18-hour days to develop a revolutionary algorithm that not only plugged the security hole, but enhanced our entire data protection system. Marcus had stood over my shoulder during those grueling weeks, asking endless questions about my methodology while I coded. "This is incredible work, Vicky," he had said, practically salivating as he watched my fingers fly across the keyboard. "When you save the company, there will definitely be a bonus in it for you. 50,000 minimum." I should have known better than to trust him, but exhaustion had clouded my judgment. The pressure to solve this crisis had consumed every waking moment, leaving little time to consider Marcus's track record of broken promises. Now, watching him dismiss my contribution with corporate buzzwords about budget constraints, I felt a familiar cold determination settle in my chest. "I'm glad you understand," Marcus continued, already turning his attention to his computer screen. "Sometimes these things are out of our hands. Corporate policies, you know how it is." But as I walked back to my cubicle, my smile never wavered. Marcus had no idea that my security patch contained a very special feature, a 30-day expiration date that only I knew about. The next morning, I arrived at the office early and began documenting everything. Marcus had already started taking credit for my algorithm in emails to the executive team, describing it as our innovative solution and the breakthrough we achieved. He carefully avoided mentioning my name in any correspondence, instead referring to his team's collaborative effort and his own leadership in crisis management. I screenshot every email, saved every presentation slide, and recorded every meeting where Marcus presented my work as his own. During our weekly team meetings, he would gesture broadly at charts showing the money saved and the disasters averted, never once acknowledging that the solution came entirely from my mind and my sleepless nights. "As you can see from these projections," Marcus announced to the gathered engineers, pointing at slides that displayed my algorithm's impact. "Our security initiative has exceeded all expectations. The board is very pleased with our performance." The way he emphasized "our" made my skin crawl, but I kept my expression neutral and continued taking notes. My colleague Jessica, who sat beside me, leaned over and whispered, "Isn't this the code you developed? Why isn't he mentioning your name?" I shrugged casually. "He's the manager. I'm sure he'll give proper credit when it matters," I replied, knowing full well that Marcus would never voluntarily share recognition. Jessica frowned, but said nothing more. Meanwhile, I had quietly begun updating my resume and reaching out to contacts at competing companies. My work on the security algorithm had been groundbreaking enough to attract attention from several major tech firms, and I started scheduling discreet coffee meetings with recruiters. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus's theft of my credit was actually opening doors I might never have had access to otherwise. Each day, I maintained my normal work routine while watching the countdown in my head. Marcus continued his victory lap, attending executive meetings where he presented detailed reports about his cost-saving solution. He even had the audacity to submit the project for a company innovation award, listing himself as the primary contributor. 2 weeks into my 30-day countdown, rumors began circulating that Marcus was being considered for a promotion to Senior Director of Technology. The position came with a 60% salary increase and stock options, rewards he would receive based entirely on my stolen work. "Congratulations," I told him when he mentioned the potential promotion during a hallway conversation. "Your leadership on the security project really paid off." His chest puffed up with pride. "Well, you know what they say about rising to the occasion. When the company needed solutions, I delivered." The shamelessness of his statement was almost impressive. As I walked away, I checked my phone discreetly. 23 days and counting. Soon, Marcus would learn the difference between taking credit for someone's work and actually understanding it. By the 3rd week, Marcus's arrogance had reached new heights. He had received official confirmation of his promotion and spent most of his time in meetings with senior leadership, discussing his revolutionary approach to cybersecurity. The $50,000 bonus he had denied me was nothing compared to his new salary package, which reportedly included a signing bonus of $100,000 and annual stock options worth even more. During his farewell lunch with our team, Marcus raised his coffee mug in a mock toast. "Here's to solving impossible problems and proving that innovation comes from strong leadership," he declared, looking directly at me with that insufferable smirk. "Sometimes you have to push your team beyond their comfort zones to achieve greatness." I smiled and raised my own mug. "Here's to getting exactly what you deserve," I replied cheerfully. The other team members chuckled, assuming I was being supportive, but Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly as if he sensed some hidden meaning. That afternoon, I received 3 job offers from different companies, each offering substantial increases in both salary and responsibility. TechFlow's biggest competitor, Innovate Solutions, had been particularly aggressive in their recruitment, offering me a position as senior systems architect with a starting salary that doubled my current income. They had heard about my security work through industry channels and wanted to hire me immediately. I accepted Innovate Solutions' offer, but negotiated a start date that would give me time to watch the final act of my carefully orchestrated plan. They agreed enthusiastically, eager to secure my expertise before other companies could make competing offers. Meanwhile, Marcus had moved into his new corner office and hired his replacement, a junior developer named Kevin, who had no experience with advanced security systems. During the handover meetings, I watched Marcus attempt to explain my algorithm to Kevin, stumbling over technical concepts he clearly didn't understand. "The system is basically self-maintaining now," Marcus told Kevin confidently. "Vicky can help you if there are any minor issues, but honestly, the code is so solid that it practically runs itself." Kevin nodded eagerly, clearly intimidated by the complexity of the system he was inheriting. I said nothing during these meetings, simply taking notes and occasionally confirming Marcus's oversimplified explanations. When Kevin asked about system maintenance schedules or backup protocols, I deferred to Marcus, who waved dismissively and assured everyone that such concerns were unnecessary. With 1 week remaining before my code's expiration, I began quietly backing up all my personal projects and removing any traces of my proprietary work from TechFlow's servers. I also started clearing out my desk, taking home personal items one by one, so that my departure wouldn't be obvious when the time came. Marcus was too busy enjoying his promotion to notice these small changes. He had already started bragging to other departments about his problem-solving skills and his natural aptitude for crisis management. Soon, he would have another crisis to manage, one that would test whether he truly understood the system he claimed to have created. Exactly 30 days after Marcus denied my bonus, I arrived at the office at my usual time and settled into my cubicle with a cup of coffee and a sense of anticipation. The countdown in my head had reached 0 during the night. and by now my security patch would have quietly deactivated itself, leaving TechFlow's client database exactly as vulnerable as it had been before my intervention. The first sign of trouble came at 9:47 a.m. when Kevin rushed into the office, his face pale and his hands shaking. "Something's wrong with the security system," he announced to anyone within earshot. "I'm getting error messages I've never seen before." I looked up from my computer with an expression of mild concern. "What kind of error messages?" I asked, knowing exactly what he was seeing, but wanting to maintain my facade of ignorance. "The client database is throwing authentication failures, and the backup systems aren't responding," Kevin replied, sweat beading on his forehead. "I tried calling Marcus, but he's in meetings all morning." "Let me take a look," I offered helpfully, walking over to Kevin's workstation. The screen displayed a cascade of red error messages, each one indicating a different component of my security system shutting down in sequence. It was almost beautiful in its systematic precision. I frowned thoughtfully, typing a few diagnostic commands that I knew would reveal the scope of the problem. "This is strange," I murmured, loud enough for nearby coworkers to hear. "It looks like the security patch is experiencing some kind of systematic failure." Within minutes, other team members began reporting similar issues. The phones started ringing as clients complained about being unable to access their accounts. Transaction processing slowed to a crawl, then stopped entirely. The same vulnerabilities that my original patch had fixed were now wide open again, but this time, the failure was happening during peak business hours when thousands of transactions were flowing through the system. By 10:30 a.m., the situation had escalated beyond Kevin's ability to handle. Client services was fielding hundreds of angry calls, and the transaction failure rate had reached critical levels. I estimated the company was losing approximately $20,000 every hour the system remained down. "We need to get Marcus down here immediately," declared Jennifer Walsh, our department's senior manager. She had been promoted to fill the gap left by Marcus's elevation, and was clearly unprepared for a crisis of this magnitude. I watched quietly as Kevin made increasingly frantic phone calls, trying to reach Marcus between his morning meetings. When Marcus finally answered, I could hear his voice through the phone's speaker, sharp with irritation at being interrupted during his important executive discussions. "What do you mean the system is failing?" Marcus snapped. "The security patch is completely stable. I designed it myself." Kevin glanced nervously around the room. "The whole database is down, Marcus. Clients can't access their accounts, and we're hemorrhaging money every minute." "That's impossible," Marcus replied, but I could hear uncertainty creeping into his voice. "The system was working perfectly yesterday." "Can you come down and take a look?" Kevin pleaded. "I've tried everything I can think of, but nothing's working." There was a long pause before Marcus responded. "I'll be down in 10 minutes, and get Vicky involved. She helped with some of the implementation details." I suppressed a smile at his grudging acknowledgement of my role. After 30 days of taking complete credit for my work, Marcus was suddenly remembering that I had been involved in the project. It was interesting how quickly his perspective changed when he needed someone to blame for the failure. As we waited for Marcus to arrive, the situation continued deteriorating. More error messages appeared on the monitoring screens, and the phone calls from angry clients grew more frequent and more hostile. Marcus burst through the department doors at 11:15 a.m., his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. His face was flushed with a combination of anger and panic as he surveyed the chaos that had erupted in his former domain. Multiple computer screens displayed error messages in glaring red text, and the constant ringing of phones created a symphony of crisis that filled the air. "What the hell happened here?" Marcus demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. He strode directly to Kevin's workstation, pushing the younger developer aside to examine the screens himself. I watched from my desk as his confident expression gradually shifted to confusion, then alarm. "The security system started failing around 9:30 this morning," Jennifer explained, her voice tight with stress. "All the protections that were put in place last month are gone. We're back to the same vulnerabilities we had before the patch." Marcus stared at the error messages, his face growing pale as the implications became clear. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, typing furiously at the keyboard. The code was solid. I tested it thoroughly. I cleared my throat gently. "Marcus, would you like me to take a look? I might be able to help troubleshoot the system." He turned to me with desperate relief. "Yes, absolutely. You worked on some of the implementation details, right? Maybe you can figure out what went wrong." The way he phrased it, "some of the implementation details," would have been insulting if it wasn't so perfectly suited to my purposes. I walked over to the workstation and began examining the code, taking my time to create the appearance of careful analysis. "This is very strange," I said after several minutes of deliberate investigation. "It looks like the security patch has completely deactivated itself." "Deactivated itself?" Marcus repeated, his voice rising an octave. "Code doesn't just deactivate itself. Someone must have tampered with it." I shook my head slowly. There's no evidence of external interference. It's more like the system was designed to shut down automatically after a certain period of time. "That's impossible," Marcus snapped. "I would never build an expiration date into critical security code." The room fell silent, except for the continued ringing of phones. Jennifer, Kevin, and several other team members were staring at Marcus with expressions of growing concern. His claim of designing the code was now directly contradicted by his apparent ignorance of its fundamental architecture. "Well," I said carefully, "perhaps we should focus on fixing the immediate problem. I'll need to examine the entire code base to understand why this happened and develop a new solution." "How long will that take?" Jennifer asked urgently. "We're losing money every minute this system is down." I pretended to consider the question thoughtfully. A complete rewrite of the security system would normally take several weeks, but given the emergency situation, I might be able to create a temporary fix within a few days. Marcus's face went white. "A few days? We can't afford to have the system down for a few days. Just put the old patch back in place." I shook my head regretfully. "I'm afraid that's not possible. Whatever caused the original patch to fail has corrupted the underlying code structure. We'll need to rebuild the security system from scratch." "But you still have copies of the original code, right?" Kevin asked hopefully. "The system failure appears to have corrupted the backup files as well," I replied with perfect honesty. "The backup files were corrupted because I had specifically designed them to be corrupted when the main system failed." Marcus sank into a nearby chair, the full weight of the crisis finally settling on his shoulders. By 2 p.m., word of the crisis had reached the executive floor, and TechFlow's board members began arriving at the office with expressions of barely contained fury. The company was now losing an estimated $30,000 per hour, and angry clients were threatening to terminate their contracts if the system wasn't restored immediately. Chief Executive Officer Patricia Reynolds stormed into our department with 3 other board members trailing behind her. Her sharp gray suit and severe expression made it clear that someone was about to face very unpleasant consequences for this disaster. "Marcus," she called out sharply. "My office. Now." Marcus stood on unsteady legs, shooting me a pleading look. "Patricia, I can explain everything. This is just a temporary setback." "Temporary?" Patricia's voice could have frozen water. "We've lost over $100,000 in the past 4 hours, and you're calling this temporary?" I continued working at the computer terminal, keeping my expression focused and professional while internally savoring every word of this conversation. The other team members had gone silent, watching the drama unfold with the fascination of witnessing a car accident in slow motion. "The security system that you personally presented to the board last month has completely failed," Board member Robert Hayes interjected, his voice dripping with disdain. "The same system you claimed was your innovative breakthrough." Marcus's face turned an interesting shade of red. "There must have been some kind of sabotage. The code was perfect when I designed it." "You designed it?" Patricia asked, her eyebrows rising dangerously. She turned to look at our entire team. "Is that accurate?" An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. Kevin shifted nervously in his chair. Jennifer examined her shoes intently. and the other engineers suddenly found their computer screens extremely interesting. Nobody wanted to contradict Marcus directly, but nobody was willing to confirm his claim either. "Vicky," Patricia said suddenly, fixing me with her penetrating gaze, "you were involved in this project. What's your assessment of the situation?" I looked up from the computer with an expression of professional concern. "Well, the security patch appears to have been designed with some kind of time-limited functionality. Unfortunately, without access to the original design documentation, it's difficult to determine exactly why the system was built this way." "Time-limited functionality?" Robert Hayes repeated slowly. "Are you saying the security patch was programmed to self-destruct?" "It's certainly possible," I replied carefully, though I would need to examine the original specifications to be certain. Patricia's eyes narrowed as she turned back to Marcus. "Where are the original design specifications for this security system?" Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again, clearly struggling to find an answer. The truth was that he had never seen any design specifications because he hadn't designed anything. All he had were the email updates I had sent him during development, none of which contained technical details he would have understood. The documentation might have been corrupted along with the system files," he finally managed to stammer. "Might have been?" Patricia's voice was deadly quiet now. "You're telling me that you implemented a $2 million security system without maintaining proper documentation?" I cleared my throat gently. "Actually, I do have some of my personal notes from when I assisted with the implementation. They might help us understand what happened." All eyes turned to me as I opened my laptop and displayed the detailed documentation I had carefully prepared for this exact moment. The specifications clearly showed the 30-day expiration date built into the security patch, along with extensive technical details that Marcus had obviously never seen before. Patricia examined the documents with growing fury, her face darkening with each page she read. "According to these specifications," Patricia announced, her voice cutting through the tense silence like a blade, "this security system was explicitly designed to deactivate after 30 days. The documentation is signed and dated by Vicky Collins, not Marcus Thompson." Marcus stumbled backward, as if he had been physically struck. "That's not... I mean, those documents must be..." He trailed off, unable to finish the lie, as Patricia continued reading from my meticulously detailed technical specifications. "Furthermore," Robert Hayes added, scanning through the files on my laptop, "every email regarding this project shows Vicky as the primary developer, with Marcus listed only as the supervising manager. Yet somehow, Marcus has been taking full credit for this work in all his presentations to the board." I watched Marcus's face cycle through a fascinating array of emotions: confusion, panic, anger, and finally, a desperate attempt at defiance. "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising to an almost hysterical pitch. "I was the project leader. I supervised every aspect of the development. Just because Vicky did some of the coding doesn't mean..." "Some of the coding," Patricia interrupted, her eyes flashing with fury. "According to these documents, she developed the entire algorithm from scratch while you were attending networking lunches." The room fell silent except for the continued ringing of phones from the customer service department. Marcus looked around desperately, seeking support from his former team members, but everyone avoided his gaze. Jennifer was staring at her computer screen. Kevin was pretending to read technical manuals, and the other engineers had suddenly discovered urgent tasks that required their immediate attention. "Vicky," Patricia said, turning to face me directly, "how long would it take you to repair this system?" I pretended to consider the question carefully, typing a few diagnostic commands while everyone waited for my response. "Well, since I have the original source code and specifications, I could have a basic patch in place within a few hours. A complete rebuild would take about a week." "And the cost of this repair?" "The emergency patch would be free, of course. The company is my priority right now. As for the full rebuild..." I paused thoughtfully. Normally, a project of this scope would cost around $200,000 if we hired external consultants. Patricia nodded grimly. Do whatever you need to do. Fix this immediately. Marcus stepped forward desperately. Wait, you can't just let her. You're fired, Patricia said flatly, not even looking at him. Security will escort you out of the building within the hour. We'll be conducting a full investigation into this fiasco, and I strongly suggest you retain legal counsel. I turned back to my computer and began typing, implementing the repair code I had already prepared weeks in advance. Within 30 minutes, the error messages began disappearing from the monitoring screens, and the client database slowly came back online. The phones stopped ringing as customer service representatives were able to access accounts again, and the transaction processing system resumed normal operations. Marcus stood frozen in the center of the room, watching me work with an expression of complete devastation. The realization was finally sinking in that I had orchestrated this entire scenario from the beginning. His stolen promotion, his salary increase, his reputation as an innovative leader, all of it had been built on sand, and now the tide was coming in. How? He whispered, barely audible above the sounds of the office returning to normal activity. I glanced up from my keyboard with the same serene smile I had given him 30 days earlier when he denied my bonus. I told you I understood completely, I replied softly. I understood that you would take credit for my work, just like you always do. So I made sure the code would demonstrate the difference between someone who creates solutions and someone who just steals them. Security guards appeared at Marcus's shoulders, ready to escort him from the building. His expensive suit suddenly looked rumpled and cheap, and his confident posture had collapsed into defeated slouching. As they led him toward the elevator, he turned back one last time with a look of pure hatred. You planned this, he accused, his voice shaking with rage and humiliation. I planned to protect my work, I corrected calmly. What happened after that was entirely your choice. The elevator doors closed on Marcus's stunned face, and I returned my attention to the computer screen. By 4 p.m., all systems were functioning normally, and TechFlow Industries was back to earning money instead of losing it. Marcus faced immediate termination and a complete destruction of his professional reputation when the board discovered he had systematically stolen credit for my innovations while denying me promised compensation. Word spread quickly through Austin's tight-knit tech community that he had taken false credit for a major security system and then failed catastrophically when the real crisis hit, making him essentially unemployable in the industry. His expensive mortgage went into default when no company would hire someone known for stealing employee work, and his wife divorced him after learning about his pattern of professional fraud. The legal fees from TechFlow's lawsuit to recover damages consumed what little savings he had left, and he was eventually forced to move back in with his parents while working retail jobs far from the tech industry he had disgraced. His LinkedIn profile became a cautionary tale shared in management ethics seminars, and his name became synonymous with managerial incompetence throughout the regional business community. 3 months later, I signed my contract as Chief Technology Officer at Innovate Solutions, earning triple my previous salary plus equity options that would make me wealthy if the company continued growing. As I looked out from my new corner office across Austin's skyline, I reflected on how satisfying it had been to watch Marcus discover that true expertise cannot be stolen, only earned, and that sometimes the most elegant revenge is simply allowing incompetent people to face the natural consequences of their own dishonesty.